So I wanted to talk a bit about before we move on to Reality Drift, talk a bit about Elite Dangerous as well. So how did you get involved in that? And was that really exciting for you to be involved in Elite, having played some of the earlier versions of it?
Yeah, so I was like a lot of people Frontier, especially at the time. I guess maybe not so much. Well, I guess now people are joining Frontier maybe because they liked Elite Dangerous, but back in those days, people were joining Frontier partly because they were fans of Elite or Frontier, in the 80s or 90s, and wanting to work on those games. But there were quite a few failed attempts at doing it. So in the year 2000, there's actually an Edge magazine where they have some screenshots of like an early Elite game, like an early version of this Elite Four that never got very far and was never finished, never got really anywhere. There were quite a few failed attempts at doing Elite because it was such a big kind of. The ambition for the next Elite game was going to be you can go anywhere, you can get out of your ship and walk around on the planet as a person. You can fly around the entire galaxy. We just weren't set up to do that. Like it was too difficult. At one point, there was a game called The Outsider. Have you heard of The Outsider at Frontier? That was intended to be like a kind of ramp towards Elite, where it was going to be like, okay, let's do a kind of GTA style game where you're in a city and you're a person trying to like prove your innocence after the president died or something. So it's going to be like a kind of thriller game, and it's going to be a GTA style game where you're driving around a city. It was in development for 5 years and was eventually cancelled because it was not going very well. I mean, it was getting towards maybe getting a publishing deal, but it was a bit of a nightmare project for some people, and it was still quite rough around the edges. So that didn't work out. So when Frontier came to the idea of Elite Dangerous, again, this was all kind of driven by David Braben, the founder of Frontier, and he's like, okay, let's not try to do this whole thing about walking around as a person to begin with. Let's just go back to ships, keep it relatively simple. And he had this. The actual reason it's called Elite Dangerous is because in the original Elite had these rankings for pilots, like harmless, or harmless, mostly harmless, and competent and so on. It went up to like dangerous, deadly, and elite. So the original idea was going to be there's going to be an elite, deadly, and then elite or something. I don't know, maybe. But the idea was to do a Kickstarter for it and crowdfund it, and that was in the fairly early days of Kickstarter, so it was quite successful. It was around the same time as Star Citizen were doing their Kickstarter too, and it got over the line, and we started work on that and planning and so on. But at that point, I was in quite a bad position because so I worked on all these games at Frontier for many years, and you've probably heard of crunch in the industry, where people like overwork.
Yeah.
Games done. And my health was basically destroyed by crunch. So in 2007, I developed severe pains and symptoms in my hands and arms. And from that point onwards, I couldn't work like I could before. I could only do a fraction of what I did before. So I carried on. I did spend some time off work. I went back, but it was still a massive struggle. Like every day was a huge struggle. So by when was this? 2013, when Elite Dangerous started, I was still massively struggling and not able to do that much.